Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3, page, the top of page 1259. So in explaining Yizbu Atse Havaya, that the trees of Havaya, the trees, the growth, the emotions, the cognitive that impact the emotions of Gan Eden, where you have the radiating of Havaya, Havaya Lakim, so that's Atse Havaya. But Yizbu means that they shall be sated, they shall be filled up. And filled up and sated means beyond their natural measure, their natural so-called wiring, which is already a higher level than the rest of the worlds, because it's Gan Eden. So Yizbu, he's explaining, comes from the word V'savata, to fill and sate, not just to fill the tank up, as he said, but abundance, like ashirus, like wealth, that goes over and beyond. So it's not just filling, you're hungry and now you're satisfied, but rather even more than satisfied. In that itself, he explained, and this is where the pasuk we're in the middle of analyzing from Mishlei, that the sated soul, the filled up soul, disregards or even tramples on things that are like a honeycomb, honey. And the hungry soul, everything that's bitter is sweet. Kol mar masuk. So we explained the second half, and he explained this in Kedusha, that this is referring to spiritual hunger. What is spiritual hunger? Torah is called food, mazen, bread. And that's why when we take Torah, we're like digesting it internally. When a person is hungry, they could be hungry in two ways. You could either be hungry because you haven't eaten for a while, or you could be hungry because you have eaten and you've tasted of the delights and you want more. Or even furthermore, because you've eaten and it's become digested and absorbed, you're hungering for more. So therefore, that's the hunger for Torah, that and that hunger has to be also saturated with ava, like a good baked bread needs to be baked properly. If it's not, it won't digest and absorb properly. So the Torah has to be saturated with the fire. The baking of the Torah is the fire of ava karish be'esh, the love that's like a fire, the love of Hashem. And then it digests well, absorbs well, and you hunger well as well, because you hunger for more. And then he explained at the end of the last paragraph, bottom of page 1258, that in Torah itself, there's Primus and Chitzenius. And the Primus, he called Primus HaTorah, he says, so when you taste from the Primus, Toyim, Tuv, Tam, the Primus HaTorah, there'll be an increased thirst, increased hunger for more learning of Torah without any limits. Basically, he's referring to Primus HaTorah as being richer because it's the inner dimension, is the deeper taste. When a person learns Chitzenius HaTorah, it doesn't say it explicitly, but it means that even though it's geschmack in the seichel, but it doesn't have quite the taimei Torah, as I explained yesterday, more in detail. And he says, Zeu nefesh re'eva kol mar mosuk, that the soul re'eva, the hungry soul, is for the bread of Torah. Kol mar mosuk is referring to the birurim of Torah, that Torah clarifies the birurim, and that's kol mar mosuk, that it transforms the bitter into sweet. And that, again, I explained several different ways yesterday. I'm not going to go over that again right now. And to the point, yeah. And in the parentheses, it indicates Tzachayim is what sweetens the bitter. But this is all Torah in the level of birurim. Birurim means that there are things to separate and clarify. So that alone puts it in the category of something that's hungry. Like he says at the end of the paragraph, that as soon as you have birud, hunger and thirst. So as I explain, I'll just review that briefly because it's negay to the next piece we're going to learn. Is first of all, as soon as you have birud, it means you're in a world where things need clarity. So there's possibility also for being hungry and thirsty, and then filling that. When a person is completely filled with Torah, alakus, not the world of birudim, as we're going to learn in a moment, they're not hungry. It's not a state of hunger. Hunger indicates something is missing. Now, in that itself, we learn two ways. One, it's missing because you simply haven't eaten, so you're starving. Another is because you've been satisfied and been fed, and that makes you even hungrier for it. You want more of it. But either way, there's a lack that needs to be filled. So that he calls in the world of birurim. I think when you break it down further, birurim means that separation between thirst, between sweet and bitter. That could also be a form of a birur. But ultimately, the Torah makes everything sweet. That alone tells you some things were not sweet beforehand. So that's the world of birurim. The next paragraph, which I'm going to review now, which we learned yesterday, the bottom of page 1258, he says, Omnam, there's a level of Torah that's higher than birurim, like the man. The man does not require any effort. Remember also, I should have mentioned, not only does Torah cause birurim, clarifies things, the Torah itself, in the level of birurim, also has birur. That you have, like we learned, you need to plant and plow in the mind in order to understand Torah. So that's the yagiyah, the effort in Torah. However, the Torah higher than birurim, both, first of all, is not involved in clarifying what's right and what's wrong. Secondly, it does not require effort, like the man. It comes from above. And thirdly, there's no pselis. There's no waste to eliminate. So there's no birur on that level. There's no digestion process that needs to separate the shaft, the waste from the nutrients. So he says this is Torah legamri legami she'einin yona levada. That's not its inyan, the Torah. Here we're talking about I don't want to say indulging, but languishing within the desire, within Torah, and as we're going to explain in a moment, that this is referring to now a sated soul, not a hungry soul. Not even hungry for Torah, even those that taste the Torah and want more of it, those that learn day and night. This is higher than birur. And the gilu is also not b'derech birur. And it doesn't come by slapshus. Like I explained yesterday, birurim means slapshus. You have to get involved in the whatever it is you're involving to clarify it. To separate something, you need to go down and separate them. And also the very process of learning and trying to understand and distinguish and clarify something, all that is slapshus. Whereas here we're talking about the Torah, the level of man, as he explains in a moment, that's the Torah that's given to us as a gift. Doesn't come through Yagiyah. Well, what does that mean? You're getting the oir of Torah, the light and energy of Torah as it is. It's not packaged. You don't have to separate anything. You don't have to clarify anything. You're getting a gili elakus, the divine revelation through Torah. Some like Matan Torah. Matan Torah, yes, the Jews prepared for it. But when Matan Torah happened, God was revealing, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, La'yilecha. He doesn't say Matan Torah, he does say Matana, but basically it's Torah the way it is, without packaging, where you don't need the birur. And it comes without aveda, you give without effort and exertion. In the parentheses, he gives us a little explanation. What level is this? He calls this the higher level of Taimei Torah. Because in Taimei Torah, the reasons, Taimei Torah has a double meaning. It means the reasons behind everything that the Torah says. And Taimei also comes from the word tuv tam, taste. It's the tasty part because it's the inner taste and the primius. So Rashi, for example, in the beginning of Shir Hashirim, when he says, Yishakenim and Shikus Piyu, he says there, the explanation, he says that we will learn the secrets of Torah and the Torah and its delicious taste. So today we can have a little taste of it, but the full inner experience of Torah and its delicious primius is really mostly will be la'asid love. He says Taimitesh is God la'asid einig habilti murgish, to the point. That's why he calls it the higher level, because there's an einig murgish, there's an einig, a pleasure you feel. It's conscious, it's tangible, it's palpable. And then there is a tainik bilti murgish, which means you're completely absorbed in it to the point you don't even feel it, but it's there. You're completely like part of the experience. So it's bilti murgish. And then he says, someone who reaches that level today, that's called a lamcha tira b'chayecha, like the others who tasted, were given a taste of the world to come. Okay, so that's a parenthesis just to give explanation of this higher level of Torah that's higher than birurim. And as I explained yesterday from Megeres HaKedesh on the Rai Mehemna of Zoyar, that Lasid Lavi, there'll be no longer birurim of right and wrong. So the Torah will be only delighting in God's wisdom. Torah is also shashrim lefanav, God's delights. So we'll just be consumed with that, not with learning Torah to understand what's right and what's wrong. Okay. And then he said, and I'm just going over since we just learned two more lines that we learned yesterday. And this is huinyan ba'asrei lav urchel lemechel. This is the level. Ba'asrei means in a asrei can mean a city or a location. In this place, in this state, this dimension, lav urchel, it's not the custom to eat, meaning it's beyond eating as we understand it both physically, but here he's also talking spiritually. Hainu she'ena b'chinas achilu b'chinas birur. Because the mere fact that you eat, what does eating mean? Eating is you take food in your mouth, you chew it, like we said before, with your teeth and so on, you grind it. It then enters your system and you digest it. The digestion process is a whole birur of separating the waste, the nutrients, turning it into blood. It's a whole process. It's like that's called birurim. Just like when you sow a field, in the process of plowing and everything you need to do and getting rid of the waste and weeding it and watering it. That's all birurim. That's the world that we're in. Avedas habirurim, it's called. The aveda of separating and clarifying and elevating and refining and so on. This is, it's not a place of achila. We used this statement earlier in the Maimorim in the second volume when he spoke about man, the third meal. He said the higher level of man, even though there's a level of man they did eat, which had no waste, but there's a level of man that he compared that it's not, that's the third meal is considered a meal that's higher than eating. That's why in Chabad we don't wash for the third meal, because it's to give us a reminder of a level that's higher than achila, because washing indicates a full meal, even though we do eat something, but just as a hint to the Asad Lave, Einig Bilti Murgish, because it's based on the pasuk that says 3 times that the man you should not eat on Shabbos. So a man lo yachlu, the third time is referring you shouldn't eat it. So that refers to the third meal of Shabbos. That just has, I mean, he discussed it earlier, but bottom line is a level. So there's a level where there's birurim between waste and food. There's a level of birurim between food and food, which is a lower level in Shabbos. And then there's a level that's higher than birurim altogether, which he's talking about here, Torah. So Torah is b'mayla mebirur umemela b'madregazu ein shayach rav and etzmai. So when you're on this level, the word hunger or thirst is not applicable. The concept doesn't exist. You're not in a world of birurim. You're in a world where there's hunger and there you eat, and there's a process of birur. Sorry, this is higher than the oven etzmai, and he refers to Tanya Seif Perek Mem, which I actually did not have a chance to look at. I was going to look at it before this class, but I forgot. Let's see if I could find it right now. I'm looking aside. Let's see. Yeah, Sof Perek Mem. What does he say? Yeah, lis tainug l'mochlekam mishle gilim. Yeah, there he talks clearly about 2 levels. One level where a person is thirsty and hungry and calling out that I'm thirsty for food or drink, thirsty for drink. But Misha, yeah, he says, yeah, Misha Emed Benar is like someone standing in a river and crying out, Mayim, Mayim, Lishtes, please give me water to drink. Have it some l'chamayim, and then there's a level, like he says before, I'm just looking up a minute. Yeah, Elam Haba. Tainugim. Okay, I'll look it up more in detail, but yes, he says that, exactly that, yeah. I'm just looking if he actually says there's a level where there's no hunger and no thirst. I don't find that language exactly. Okay. Yeah, I'll look into some more. Okay, so we're on top of page 1259, and I'm going to continue from the first line there, and these pages can be found on ayinbeis.com. So now he says, I was going back to the pasuk. Remember the first half of the pasuk in Mishlei, the bottom of page 1257, talked about a sated soul, a filled up soul. The second half talked about a hungry soul. So now he's going to, by contrast, the hungry soul we addressed, a soul that tasted Torah, the food of Torah, and wants more, is hungry. Now we're talking about Torah higher than Birudim, so the concept of hunger is not there. So now he says, this is the level, the Zehu, Nefesh Seveya. This is the filled, the sated soul. Shehi, below they say, there's missing a word, Shehi Seveya, Sova Be'etzem, Lo Ya'idei Achila. Yeah, it makes sense. Basically, the word that it is fundamentally filled, essentially filled, and not through eating. You know, it's a soul that's basking. That's the word I was looking for. Basking in the delights of Torah, which is beyond, like he said, does not come through effort. It's the gift that we're given, and we're in it. So therefore, there's no berudim involved, and therefore there's no hunger involved. You're in it. You're only shaykh to be hungry when you're lacking something. Even the higher level of hunger. This is a level that's be'etzem filled, not through achila. So it's a person like in the light. You're in the light, so you don't need light. You're not seeking light because you're there. You're filled up. In other words, he's explaining what means achila. It means you don't need to go through a process of I'm hungry and then I eat in order to fill my hunger. It's not b'derech achila, sho'ina birudim. Because achila is birudim. The very fact that you have to eat something is birudim. For example, let's just hypothetical. If a human being was created in a way where we don't need to consume food, like an amoeba, we are self-sustaining, then you wouldn't need birudim. You wouldn't need to take food, whatever it is, drink, food, and consume it, digest it, and so on. The thing is that Hashem, God created us in a way that we are dependent on outside food. We can't sustain, which serves as fuel. The explanations for that are given in Kabbalah and Chassidus, because they have sparks that are higher that we feed off, we get nourished from. It's also a way of elevating the world. But regardless of the reason, the bottom line is you need to eat. A nefesh seveya in Ruchnius does not need to eat because he's satisfied from within. He's filled up. It's not birudim, it's not achila. Then he says this next line, which I looked at already. I'm not clear what he means, but let me read it. The eino meir adayin etzem ha'er sheshayich b'ra'ovet. And the etzem ha'er is not radiating yet. Where there, you could say, is shayich hunger. So initially, this seems to mean that this level that we're talking about, because you can argue, I'm not sure he means this, but it's possible. You could argue, fine, you're not hungry for the regular level of food, but there's the etzem ha'er that's much higher, and you should be hungry for that. So even though, yes, you don't need the oir that comes through birurim, but you should be wanting the hunger of the oir that's higher than birurim. That's etzem ha'er. I'm not sure that's what he means, because he says sheshayich b'oven adayin metzem shayich, because before he said that the oven is only shayich when there's the world of birurim. When you're not in the world of birurim, lo shayich oven. So why is he saying now that ein meir adayin? Unless he's referring to the level of birurim. And that level is ein meir adayin etzem sheshayich b'oven. That's more likely what he means. I'm just thinking out loud, to be honest. I hope I'm not confusing anyone. It sounds more like this, what I'm reading now. V'hainu, this level we're talking about that does not need achila, because it's higher than berurim and higher than hunger, means it's not the level that where you need food, which is berurim. And the Ein Meir continues on that level that needs food and is berurim, where it doesn't radiate etzem ha'er, and that's why sheshayich beir oven. That's why shayich oven, because he doesn't have the etzem ha'er. Whereas this level does have the etzem ha'er, so there's no hunger. That's what it seems like is the pshat. But there comes a parenthesis now, which may clarify, which will surely clarify this further. I just wanted to read it and just point out exactly what he's saying here. But I'm going to read the parentheses, and hopefully that will help clarify this. Because, yeah, I'm going to skip the parentheses actually for a moment, because I see, it's 7 lines down. 7 lines down. But when the etzem does radiate begili mamish, b'lishu misapshus klal, without any hislapshus, uba b'chinas matona le b'derech achila b'chinas avedi v'yigia. Yeah, it's correct what I just said. That's the pshat. And it comes like a gift, not through eating, in this form of work and effort, which is eating is a process of effort. Then, harihu b'chinas nefesh seveya, then it's a filled and sated soul, the etzem, she'ein by ravin klal. Yeah. So it's correct. When Ein Meir Adayin Etzem Ha'er is referring to the lower level. So disregard what I said at the beginning. First, I was trying to force it, but it was not. I was not correct. This is a pshat. There's when it's not Meir Etzem Ha'er, there's hunger. Now we're talking about a level where there's no hunger because the Etzem Ha'er is radiating like a gift. There's no effort. There's no achila, no berurim. That's this higher level of Torah. I'm going to go back now to the parentheses. I just wanted to see the contrast. Okay, let's go to the parentheses, and then I'll stop for questions. So the parentheses, he says, V'hainu mitzad beis inyonim hu harave. Okay, he's now going to explain and break it down further that what really causes hunger. He says, Hainu, this means that there are 2 reasons. Beis inyonim is due to 2 factors that there's hunger. He's breaking this down now. Echad, why is there hunger? Because it's in a form of eating. Like we said earlier, when a person is used to eating, he has a desire to eat. When a person is, for example, let's talk about somebody who barely eats, meagerly, or fasts a lot. So essentially they break that desire. They'll only eat the minimum. But someone that's used to eating, that causes a desire to eat. And the more he's accustomed to something, the more he's going to have a desire. Like he said before in the context of where you're eating a sparse piece of bread or you're eating delights. But here it means even broader. The more somebody indulges in eating, the more they desire eating. Because it's a very big part of them, canal, like we said earlier. So this is still the first reason that causes hunger. And you can say in this level that we're discussing, we can say, since this person who's desiring to eat and is hungry for food is because he's a state of recipient. He's a taker, not a giver. He's a makabel. The ein mesachid mamish, and he's not completely uniting liyas kedavar echad. Oh, very interesting. Okay. He's basically saying when a person is dependent on something, they're in a state of recipient. They're not the etzem. When you become one with the source, let's say you become one with the source of life, then you're not in a state where you're constantly desiring more. This whole idea that you're desiring and creating a hunger is because you're not the thing itself. So you're hungry for it. Whether it's food or it's ruchnius, like Torah. You ate Torah, you tasted it, you ingested it, but you're hungry for more, means you're not the very etzem. We're going to learn in a moment that the Torah that's higher than Berudim is that way. So this is the first reason for hunger, is because, like he says, it's coming in a form of achila. That means I'm here, the food is here, and I need to consume it for me to satisfy myself. That alone puts you in a place of makabel. He's not one with the source. Because he's not on this level of atzmi. Like we said, it's not etzem ha'er. He's receiving. So as soon as you're a recipient, whatever it is, there's going to be this context of I want more, I need more, etc. It develops a need, essentially. When you're a recipient, you're essentially in need. Habeis, what's the second factor that causes hunger? He's saying that even after you eat, even after there's the birur, you're not getting the etzem ha'er. You're getting the eir as it manifests in some form of garment. But it's still, only thing is, it's a higher level than it was before. That's why it sates the person. That's why the hunger has been filled. But what you're getting is not etzem ha'er. So he's saying both things. Firstly, even before you begin the process, you're not the very thing itself. That's why you're dependent on achila to receive and satisfy your hunger. And that causes the hunger. The second is even when you are filled, you're not getting the very etzem ha'er. They're only getting more than before, and that's why you're satisfied. That's why your hunger has subsided. V'zuhi sibas ha'ra'aven shemisava oid el hagilui. And this causes the hunger that he wants more, to receive more of the gili. Since he didn't get the etzem, he wants more of it. So in other words, there's two reasons he's hungry. One is not the etzem, and number two, even what he gets is not the etzem, so that causes continuous hunger to continuously grow. And then comes after the prince, when the etzem ha'er is radiating, the gili, there's no islapshus. And becomes the form of matana without effort. So it's not b'derech achila in both aspects. You're getting the etzem, that means you're uniting with it. And two, you're getting the etzem, so it's not like only something that is a reflection of it. So he's now in a state of a sated and filled soul that does, but etzem fundamentally that does not have any hunger. And here's the contrast, because he's no longer he's not in a state of being a recipient. Because he became one with it, and the core essence is radiating within him. So, for example, when you say a dry hand gets wet, why? Because it's not wetness. You don't say a fish gets wet, or you don't say water gets wet. Why? Because water is water. Water is in the etzem of water, so it doesn't get wet, it is wet. It's a noun, it's a state of being, the higher level. Whereas the first level is you're experiencing it. So I'm not Torah, so I'm hungry for it. The more I learn, the hungrier I get, because I'm not one with it. So that's why I'm hungry. And every time I get filled, I want more. So in other words, it's two states. One is a state of being, and one is more like a verb and experience. We've learned about this. One is being in the zone, and one is outside of it, and you're experiencing. B'tainuk bilti murgish is you're in it. You can't even talk about it. Similar to what we discussed earlier, when a person is all consumed love, he can't even talk about it. It's like standing in awe of something. It's not like, oh, here I am, and I'm reporting my experience. So it's really two states of experience something, completely becoming one with it, or it's a state where you're still experiencing it, and that's why it's a good experience, because you're growing and you're learning, and it's birudim, and you're filling yourself up with Torah. But this is how he explains the difference between a hungry soul and a filled soul. So filled here is not filled after hunger, it's a very qualitatively different state. In the hungry hungry soul, there are two ways. One is you're hungry because you haven't eaten, so you're really hungry. One is because you have eaten and you're hungrier for more. And then there's a sated soul, which is a different type of experience altogether. That's how he's explaining the two phrases in Mishlei at the bottom of page 1257. So I'm going to stop here. We're not finished yet. I'll just read one more line. And that's why in this level, it's not even shayach, not possible. The whole idea does not apply, the idea of hunger and thirst. Okay, there's going to be one more parenthesis before the end of this paragraph. And then he's going to go back to the first half of the verse of Mishlei to explain the second half. What does it mean then that he ignores or tramples on honeycomb, honey, the second half of that first half of the verse? But anybody want to ask anything or comment? No, okay. So now the parentheses, another parenthesis, he says, "Va'ayim mashin is bar le'il. Dibra masl v'Hashem omer hamachasa ani habeis." The second v'Hashem omer ani hamachasa, I believe that's the last mimer in volume 2. I think so, yeah. Be'inyan enei odom lo tizbiena achshav. That when you see something, the eyes of a person don't save him. When you see something that's pleasurable, that is not enough. You need to experience it for you to be sated. This tizbe'ena. So any adam late tizbe'ena. So explain there, achshav. That's how it is now. Mashenkin la'osid. However, in the future, it won't be that way. That you will be able to be sated by seeing something. I remember it. I have to look it up again to understand the pshat, but he says, "V'yuvan al pia now." This will be understood according to what we said before. Because when you're in a state today, we're in a state of hunger. So just seeing something just gives you a vision of it, but it doesn't mean you get filled with that. Mashenkin la'asadavi, since we'll be in it, so it's not a matter of hunger. So then once we're in it, just by seeing it, you're experiencing it. I believe that's what he said, something like that. But he's saying what is said there is be understood about what we learned just now. That seems to be the pshat. Umashakosov gabi aman. So now he asks the question. By the man, it says, "Vayarivecha." It says in Ekev, in Parsha Ekev, "Vayarivecha," and you were hungry. That you were hungry. Why did Hashem give man? Because the people didn't have what to eat. They were hungry. Based on what we just said, that the man is a level higher than Birurim, where there's no Ra'ov and there's no hunger. So what does the pasuk say? Vayanche vayirivecha. Vayanche vayirivecha means you were afflicted and you were hungry. So Yesh Shleimer, he says, to answer this, mipnei shemakom mokim loy bo lamata b'chinas gili mamish k'moishu be'etzem. Because the man, though it was truly high, it was indeed higher than the level of Birurim, like lechem in haaretz, like bread from the earth, but it didn't come down below mamish and gili exactly as it is in its core state. So he's now qualifying this level of etzem or etzem, that there's two stages. It could come down completely, which I assume would be la'asid love, but now it didn't come down. That's why there was a measure, an element of hunger, but not to be confused with the hunger for food as in the lechem in haaretz, the lower level, because of birurim. This is higher than birurim, but it didn't come down completely as it was above, and that's why you can use the word hunger here. Like it says elsewhere, samchenu ki yemes anisanu. She's not saying what it says there, but samchenu ki yemes anisanu. Rejoice us or make us happy, ki yemes anisanu, like the days when we were oppressed. I'd have to look this up. I don't know what he's referring to, but I guess there's that level that there's still something of hunger. Because samchenu, what means samchenu when you're talking about oppression? So it could be because there's something still lacking. Like I just said, yeah. So that's again in volume 2. Okay, so basically he's referring us there, and then he says, "V'mashakosov sham." And what it says there, the inyan vayarivecha, Michael Sharaven, that the man is called the food of hunger because it came out of their hunger. So he's giving another explanation. The fact that he calls it a Michael, a food of hunger, meaning the results from hunger, he says the contrary. Not because of the hunger of Birurim, but because it's einig bilti murgish, it's einig beyond sensation. There's no feeling That's why it's called Michael Sharovin. So in other words, a different meaning of hunger. Hunger means that there's no taste, that there's no sensation. So there's a hunger as a lack of. And now he's talking about a hunger that is considered, in other words, it's relative to the level when we feel filled. This is completely not sensed. So it's called a Michael Sharovin, meaning higher than eating, essentially. That's what he said there. I remember that piece. I have to look it up as well. So basically, he's giving two answers here to this question. One is that it doesn't come down mamish like the etzem. So there's still a measure of desiring something, that gili atzmi, but that's very different than the desiring that's in the Torah of Birurim. We are actually desiring like a food. And the second answer he's giving now at the end here is because it's higher than the whole concept of eating. So therefore, in other words, it's like a hunger higher than food, not lower than food. Like similar to what it says in about Midbar. It says a Midbar, a desert, lo yoshev adam sham. A desert is not a place of civilization. People don't dwell there. So the Alter Rebbe teaches lo yoshev adam sham could be in the negative. It's a desert that's below civilization. It's not habitable. You can't live there in a desert. But he says lo yoshev adam sham means it's higher. Lo yoshev adam, the adam ha'elyon is a lower level than the Midbar. The Midbar is not habitable because it's higher than civilization. So in other words, the concept of hunger can be interpreted in a positive way and a negative way. I say negative, as a lack or something higher than food. That's what he's saying here. It's very brief, but it's really a parenthesis to qualify this point. About this point of different levels of hunger and being sated and filled. So with that, we conclude the paragraph. And now we still have to understand what is the verse saying, that as a result of that, we disregard or we even trample on, and we completely don't value honey and the sweet honey and honeycomb. But let me stop here if anybody wants me to clarify anything. Let's do that first. No? Okay. So moving right along. V'zehu, next paragraph, page 1259. V'zehu nefesh svea tovus neifas. So the words mean literally that the filled soul, tovus is the word like tramples, Rashi says. Like, completely doesn't respect, it doesn't value. So trampling means completely ignores. Or even worse, nefesh is, honey is dvash, nefesh is a honeycomb. So it's like even more than just honey, it's the source of honey. So he says, so now we'll understand this, like it says, Hanechmodim mizov, umesukim midvash, v'nefesh seifim. So you're talking about Torah that's more precious than gold, more desirable than gold, and sweeter than honey, v'nefesh seifim. Not sure what nefesh seifim means. Seifim means gazes upon. Seifim, it's like, does he mean that it's higher than the honeycomb? But he uses the same word, nefesh. It's not, looks like, let's see how he explains it, and we'll see what it means. It's explained elsewhere. The zav, ubchinas sharvet hazav. Zav, gold, is referring to the golden wand, the king's, what do we call it? Wand? Not wand.
Scepter.
Yeah. Yeah, the king's scepter, which was sharvet hazav. It says in the Megillah Esther, that it was a golden scepter. The mavur b'teireh, what is that level? Explains in Teireh, Dibra Maschel v'yeshet hamelech, that the melech extended his scepter, his golden scepter, shubchinas hamshoches erein sev baruch hu shenimshech lahachiyas ha'elemis. Now, when the king doing that, the king is referring to God, because Achashverosh sometimes is a symbol. Achris v'reishish hamelech she'achris v'reishish shaloi. So his extension of his golden scepter is the erein sof that is drawn toward sustaining, toward energizing and sustaining ha'elim, is the worlds. U'kamesha kosev es sharvet hazov v'hoya v'chaya. In other words, the sharvet hazov, when the king would extend his scepter, that was a sign of acquiescence is not the right word, a sign of benevolence, because that's what he does. That's when a king extended his scepter, it was a sign of He's accepting, in this case, to Esther Hamalka, sign of goodwill. So it causes things. I guess the pasuk says Shavet Azov V'Chaya, meaning when there was a question, let's say the king was someone in his favor or not in his favor, if he didn't extend the scepter, the person was often put to death. If he extended the scepter, meant that he extended his benevolence, and the person lived. What is that in Ruchnius? In Ruchnius, that's the Eir Ein Sof extending itself to energize the worlds. Chayes ha'elems. So that's the level of Zov. He's soon going to explain what that means in detail. V'hu b'chinas gili hakav. Why is it compared to a scepter? Because the kav, that's what the kav is. The kav is like a thin, narrow line, a ray of light, like a scepter. And the kav, hanimshich made in sof shula eir ba'elems. Why did the kav come as a kav? The chut, kotzer v'dak is the expression in Eitz Chaim. A line and a thread that was short and narrow and slim, or because this kav, as opposed to Eir Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, was all expansive and it consumed all of existence. There was no room for anything else. The kav is like the stream of consciousness of the teacher that is focused like a laser beam toward the students and customizes and tailors the energy toward each makabel, toward each recipient. So the kav is saying, is this Eir Hazov, the Sharvet Hazov of the king extending like the kav to radiate into the world. So literally Sharvet Hazov, this golden scepter, is literally like a physical manifestation of the kav. That's what he explains in Torah Higher. Okay. Ube'esses spheres hu b'chinas bina. What is this level in the 10 spheres? The kav is in general that focused energy. In 10 spheres, this is the level of bina. Zav, Bina, Umalchus. So Me'er is a classic Kabbalistic work by the students of the is by the student whose name was Rabbi Meir Papirash. He wrote Me'er is like a type of Kabbalistic encyclopedia. I mentioned it a number of times. Chassidus brings it extensively. It goes through the Aleph Beis of every level that you wish and tells you what Kabbalistic sphere level that is, sphere or position in the spiritual map. So he says that Marecha Zayin, which would be Zayin Zov, Marecha Zayin means the section in the Insist Encyclopedia of the letter Zayin, all the words that begin with a Zayin, Sif Yud Aleph, section 11, or chapter 11. So Zov, he says, is Bino Malchus. So we see from this, the Kav in general, and in spheres, this level of Zov is Bina. He's focusing on Bina now. Which means the Eir that relates to the worlds, the Bina hu mokra ishtalshus. We say Chochma is reishis ishtal. Reishis meaning it's somewhat removed still. So reishis. Bina is the beginning of ishtalshus because the source of ishtalshus, because everything begins. Bina develops and fleshes out the Nakuda of Chochma, from which then can extend the rest, which is like the mother and the womb that will bring birth to the Midas and to all of existence. So Bina is Mokar Shtashus, the Kav in general, and Bina specifically in the spheres. That's the level of the Sharvet Hazov, the golden scepter. Good. Okay, a parenthesis, a qualification, I guess. And nevertheless, Razal still says, because here's a question. Razal say, the Medrash says, Lo yehoya elam kedai lishtamish bezov. The world was not worthy of using gold, and the only reason God created it was for the zov, the gold in the Mishkan, in the temple, in the sanctuary. Kesef zov and necheshes, they used gold to make the ark and other menorah zov, the golden menorah, and so on. So there are mizbeach hazov. So based on that, it sounds like Zov is higher than the worlds. Lo yoyi kedai. The Olam ubchina Zah. Because Olam is the level of Zah. Zov is the level of Bina. That's why the world, Zah, is not worthy of Zov. V'loy nivra ela b'shvil Beis HaMikdash. And the only reason gold was created for the Beis HaMikdash, like I just mentioned, Shu kamoy HaGan Eden, which is like the level of Gan Eden, commotion is bar le'il, like we learned before on page 1255. So it's not a question really. He's just pointing out that it's true that Zav is, on one hand, generally is for the world, but Zav itself is like a higher level of energy that goes into the worlds, and it really belongs more to the Beis Hamikdash and Gan Eden, which is higher than the worlds. But it's not a contradiction, because at the end of the day, we learned Bina is also Revetzes ala Afrechim. Bina hovers over its children. So though Bina is not Zah, but it's also not Atzmi as Bina either. It's the level of gold. So it's like it's higher than the world, but it still relates to them. That's the qualification. It may be relevant to what we're going to discuss soon in context of this whole verse of Nefesh Seveya. Just for the record, I looked around for the sources of this whole section, and I haven't found it yet. So usually these things are brought earlier by the previous Rabbeim. The Alter Rebbe I did not find it. I didn't find it in the Tzemach Tzedek. The only place it still could be in the Mittler Rebbe somewhere. I'm so saying it because if it's not, then this would be pretty much an original piece from the Rebbe Rashab. But I still lean towards saying that it's probably somewhere in the Rebbe Marash or the Mittler Rebbe. I will look further. I'll keep you posted. But I usually look because I also want to see the context. Sometimes you can appreciate the points when you look at where the original sources for this are. Where the original sources for this idea. But it continues. He's developing it into a beautiful concept there. So that's Zav. Okay, upaz or pause ubchinas chochma. Why is he even bringing pause here? How do you translate pause? Zav pause. Because pause is also talks in the Megillah, talks about pause. Does anyone know how you translate pause? I know. Let me look it up. Paz. Yeah. Paz is another form of gold. You say Zav or Paz is sometimes called fine gold. Like, gold in its purest form is somewhat malleable. It's not like silver. Paz gold is a little softer. So I think in the when you say Zav, Paz or Zav, referring to two levels of gold. One is, I guess, more hardened gold that may have been some alloy was added to it, and Paz is pure fine gold, if I recall correctly. So he says Paz, which is higher than Bina, hubchinas chochma. Why he's bringing it here, I'm not sure. Could just be to just round out the picture. But he says the level of chochma could isa b'medrash Rabbah. Like it says in Medrash Rabbah, pasuk reishe kosem Paz, that his head was paved, yeah, was like when you cover something with gold. What is that called? Paved with gold, or anyway, Reisha Kashem Paz Zua Teira. This is referring to Teira. Shenemar Hashem Kainani Reishis Darke. Reishis, since Hashem nested the beginning of his ways, that's Teira. So that word Reisha Kashem Paz was referring to Teira V'Yadua. The Reishis Darke Hu B'chinas Chachma. The beginning of the way, of the journey, or the path, if you wish, is Teira. So that's the level of Chachma, the level of Paz. Okay. Nimtza.
Torah in its undiluted form.
Yeah, so he's going to say like this, Nimtza. So what do we derive from this? Zav upaz ubchinas Chochma Bina. Two levels of gold. Zav and Paz, gold and fine gold, is Chochma and Bina. V'hainu b'chinas yichud chitzeni the Abba ve'ima. This is referring to the outer union, not the inner complete union that creates new energy. The outer union that relates more to the midas. of Chochma and Bina. That's what gold is about. But we're going to talk about a level that's higher than gold. Nechmadim is Zav. I'm just wondering where I should stop here because I'll just go a few more lines. I'll say it like this. V'zeh inyan paz ois tevis de Baruch Sha'amar. Baruch Sha'amar has 87 letters, 87 words. 87 words. Paz is 87. So what's the connection? Sha'inyan reishi kosem paz k'mesh kosem b'priyas chaim shar azmiras perik dalet. Because Baruch Sha'amar, which is Baruch Sha'amar v'haya ha'elam, it's God saying that there shall be a world. So it's the Chayas Salakus, the divine energy that's relating to worlds. And that's why it consists of 87. It's the level of Chochma, but it's Chochma, Chachenius Chochma, and ultimately Bina as well. That's connected, Reishi Kosem Paz, like it says in Priyetz Chaim in the Shar Azmiras, chapter 4. Baruch Sha'amar medaber b'isavas elements. And Baruch Sha'amar that we say every morning speaks about the creations of the worlds. Creation of the worlds. V'zeu sha'amar v'haya elam. When we say Baruch sha'amar v'haya elam, the word sha'amar v'haya elam Rasha Tevis is an acronym for the word shava. Sha'amar v'haya ha'elam is a shin, a vav, and a hey. Shava. Dahainu k'moshe kol ha'elam is klulim ba'ak. That's how all the worlds are encompassed in the world of Adam Kadmon, that the map, that general map, bird's eye view. We're talking here again, chitzenius ak, not pnimius, commissioners barley ill. I know that Rebbe Rashab is packing a lot of stuff in just a few lines, but suffice it to say that he's tying together this with everything we learned earlier, that we're talking about the divine energy as it relates to existence. So he explained it now in the context of Chochma and Bina and gold. Now Baruch Sha'amar, and now we also added that Baruch Sha'amar has 87 words, and the first opening is Shava, which refers to where everything is equal, because an Ak it's like a bird's eye view of the entire picture of existence. So that's why it's the word Shava. Sha'amar v'haya elam. So it's not the world as it is; it's how the world is seen in the world of Ak, but chitzenius Ak. Now I'll just finish because I didn't want to leave. Let's not leave it hanging. So now he goes back to the beginning of the paragraph. V'zehu hanachmadim mizav u'mepaz. Oh, he brings paz because the pasuk says paz. He just didn't bring it at the beginning. That's why he mentions paz. It says hanachmadim, more precious, more dear, the more desired than gold. Both levels of gold. So he says that's why we say nachmadim mizav u'mepaz. The Torah, what's more precious than gold? Both levels of gold. The answer is, hu b'chinas, he b'chinas yichud pnimi dava. That's the yichud pnimi of Chochma and Bina. So in Torah you have the yichud chitzeni, which is called gold, or fine gold, the two levels of gold, and then there's nechmadim, which means more precious. Al keni l'maylim b'chinas zavu pas, because you're talking about the yichud pnimi. And the Yichud Pnimi, as we said, is deeper than the Yichud Chitzeni, which of course relates to what we're discussing here, because we're going to learn that the Yichud Chitzeni is Birurim, and the Yichud Pnimi is a Nefesh Sveya, is a full soul that is not hungry at all. He didn't spell it out yet, but he's going to spell it out. Not to rush things, I'm going to stop here, but he's going to continue. What does that mean, sweeter than honey? V'nefesh seifim. Oh, sweeter than honey. Okay, the verse means like sweeter than honey, and the honeycomb that's dripping. I think that's what nefesh seifim is. So he's going to explain that's why the soul that's filled tramples on or completely disregards, doesn't have any value in honeycomb because it's higher than honey, because it's filled with yichud pnimi, and honey is only yichud chitzeni, as we're going to learn, or einig murgish, that he's going to explain briefly. So we'll stop here, but he's explaining this verse based on this higher level that's going to be Yizbu Atse Havaya. Is going to ultimately explain to us the level that's higher than Gan Eden on its own, that reaches a state of Yizbu, sated and filled, higher than a place where you're just having the natural, or it's filled to the to capacity, but not going beyond that. So we're going to learn it all more inside, and it's all talking about the Yizbu. So just keep that in mind, so we don't go off course. Okay, I'm going to stop here, but let me stop if anybody has any questions. 12:59 here. Okay. Clear? Clear? Good. Yeah, Mesuka Midvash. The next piece is going to be Mesuka Midvash. This is Einig Amurgish, Einig Bilti Murgish.
Like divine consciousness, it's unreal. It's like pure without any little things. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, and it's all connected to the theme of Ayin Beis, of interface, but it's now all through the worlds of, we're talking all through the context of Gan Eden, and that which is even higher than Gan Eden's natural divine revelation. So we'll explain it all. I'm going to stop here.